Right. All right. So, welcome again to the next little iteration of our work group. And we talked in our last work group about the data standard changes as we knew them back then a couple of months ago. We now know exactly what they're going to look like in our system, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to use our work group space to go over those changes, show them to you in the in a training system, so that you can get an idea of what you'll be looking at come 10/1. Now, most of us don't work on the weekends, so 10/1 falls on a Sunday. Unfortunately, I will be working on the weekend that day to make sure everything looks good for you all when you come back to the office on 10/2. But you should be okay by then. But as always, if you run into any problems when you're logging in that day, things don't look right, they look off for some reason, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go over some housekeeping stuff. I mentioned that we're going to have this recorded. It's going to be available on our OHS website, and I'll send out that information to the group like I did last time. Please, unless you are asking a question or talking to me directly, please stay muted. I'm trying to eliminate any background noise so that we can keep this recording pretty clear. If you have a question at any point in time, you can use the raise your hand function. I'll call on you as I see them. You can put your question in the chat. Our HMIS data committee has agreed to help me out and monitor that chat and call any questions that you may have. And of course, you can always come off of mute and just let me know that you have a question, and we'll handle it that way. Any information that I'm sharing with you today should be disseminated to all of your HMIS end users at your agency. So if they couldn't be here today for whatever reason or another, you want to make sure that they get this recording. So again, I'm going to send out the link and you'll be able to find it. I'll do my due diligence in sending that out to you, but please also do your due diligence and make sure folks get that information, because on 10/2, when it comes time to put this stuff in, people might be shocked, and we don't want that. Okay. Moving forward here. So here's our agenda, pretty straightforward. We're going to go over the timeline as I know it so far. We're going to talk about each of the screen updates, and we're going to break this down, all of the different updates, by basically where they exist in the system. So starting with sort of multiple screen implications, things that are going to change across a lot of different screens. And then we're going to go into individual screens. So things for program setup, profile, enrollment, status and current living situation, services, and exit. Okay. And then at the very end, we'll have a live question and answer if I haven't answered anything up until that point. At that point, too, it doesn't have to be about the data standard changes. If you have other questions that you feel like the group can help you with, or I can help you with in the moment, we can take those questions then as well. All right. Any questions or things we want to add to this agenda to start with? All right. Not here. Oh, hey, Sharon. Sharon Perry's Cleveland Housing Network. You're muted.
Sorry, would we be able to get a copy of the printout here that you have?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Would we be able to get a copy of the information that you have in front of us?
I'm so sorry. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but Siri thought I was talking to her. And so she kept talking when you were talking. Anyway, sorry, one more time.
Would we be able to get a copy of the information that you have in front of us?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to, along with the recording, I'm going to put this PowerPoint slide deck on the website as well. So you'll be able to pull that up for yourself. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that. They have to stop listening to us, you know? Okay. So let's go ahead and move into this timeline. Now, obviously, some of this is going to be in the past, but this is sort of what I was working with. So on September 1st, all of those updates, the data standard updates, were available in the training site for us to look at, review, create our training documents, that kind of stuff. On September 18th, which would have been Monday, all of the updates were made in our live site, but they were all marked as do not use. But that gave me the opportunity to already start creating the screens and updating custom data elements or updating custom screens and things like that ahead of time, so that I don't have to do too much on 10/1. On 10/1, which again is a Sunday, the data standards will go live in our system. Any data collected will need to reflect the data standard changes as of that day. So in other words, anything that I'm giving you today as changes will need to be reflected in your data collection process before 10.1, so that on 10.1 you're collecting that information. All screens and templates, so things that exist within our system to create the screens that you see to enter data in, will be updated by our vendor, BitFocus, automatically. Now, there's some of you who are doing data entry for programs that are custom. So I'm looking at people who do ODH data entry, Ohio Department of Health. Those of you who are doing PSH, the exit screen is customized to include some of that eviction data that we're trying to capture. And then the VA also has SSVF projects also have a custom screen for exit for everything, actually, enrollment, status, and exit, because of the disability information that we were trying to collect that the VA doesn't require. Anyway, long story short is I have to manually update those. So if anything that you're seeing in those programs specifically doesn't look right, you definitely want to reach out to me, because it's my fault. Otherwise, it's not my fault. But we'll handle that with the vendor. Um, so the other thing is that reporting will be switched to the new fiscal year requirement. So as the data standard changes, as the data standards change, so too does the reporting that goes along with it. So the annual performance reports, the exports, things of that nature will all change to the new data standard elements, which means that if you have a report that is due, that usually, or like the reporting cycle ends on 9/30, sometimes the vendor will allow you to have access to the old format to input your data to wherever you need to input it to. Other times that's not the case. For a good example, the VA this year is not allowing after 10.1 to pull any data after 10.1 in what you have to put in, right? What you have to put into your repository is going to be the old format. And so you want to make sure you pull that out ahead of time, because it won't be available after 10.1. Okay. So if you have any grant requirements that have APRs or exports that are needed, you want to make sure you pull that out ahead of time, because you might not have access to it after 10.1. Okay. All right. So let's get into the actual updates then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each of these in those little sections that we talked about, and then I'm going to actually show it to you in the training system, so you'll get an idea of what it looks like. Okay. So first of all, the updates that are happening on multiple screens. In all fields where client refused used to be is now going to be client prefers not to answer in your drop-down list. That will be the recommended answer for all missing data. So things that we can't collect for whatever reason, things that you didn't ask about, maybe you forgot, whatever it might be, we're just going to use that answer as client prefers not to answer, so as to make it very clear, what's going on in our system, and to be sort of consistent across the board. So that's one change for multiple screens. Then we have some pretty specific data elements that are changing on multiple screens. The VA health insurance used to be called Veterans Administration VA Medical Services. They changed that language to say Veterans Health Administration. So that'll be on all the screens where the health insurance is collected. Anywhere where they mentioned survivors of domestic violence, they've changed it to that language, survivors of domestic violence. I think it used to be domestic violence victim, or survivor, something to that effect. But it's going to be changed now to that language here on your screen. And then if you have a HOPWOP project, receiving public HIV/AIDS medical assistance is removed as a medical assistance option. Okay, there's only one program, I believe, that I know of, that's going to have that impact. Okay, so I'm not going to show you those in the live system because they're going to come up. All right, as I show you more. Okay, but now we're going to get into program setup updates. The program setup really is stuff that I handle on my end, but I want you to know about what's going on as a whole. So the first thing is HMIS participation status. So this has always been tracked. We've always tracked whether or not you are participating in HMIS. And of course, because you're here, most of you are, of course. And it now includes a status start and end date. So from my perspective, this is a good thing, because what used to happen is if there was a project that historically did not track an HMIS and then now will, I would have to create a whole new project because I wasn't able to change the HMIS participating status without messing up a lot of reporting stuff on the back end. So now I can change this and flip-flop our status as needed. Now, I hope I don't have to do that because I'm hoping that you all remain in HMIS and you keep tracking everything that you're doing, because it does really help the entire COC. But that's a new way to track this. The other thing, and this is probably one of the more important changes that I have to really pay attention to, is something called CE participation status. So now we have to clarify within the project setup of almost every single project what role you're playing is in regards to coordinated entry. So are you an access point or are you receiving referrals from coordinated entry? So a lot of your projects are going to be, no, you're not an access point, but you do receive referrals from HMI or from CE. So for Frontline, who is running our current coordinated entry system, you all will be listed as the access point, at least the only one at this point. And then we'll put, these are the different services that you possibly could give as a coordinated entry access point, and I'll make sure that we get the correct one selected for you. But everyone else is going to look more like this. No, you're not, this says participation status, but it's really, you're not the access point, but you do receive referrals. And again, it's nice because we can change back and forth. So if some program decides, we don't want to take referrals from there, or a historically non-CE referral program wants to start taking referrals, we can change this without having to mess around too much. The status we can sort of overlap dates and things, or meet updates, I should say. So I'll have to go in and do this for every single project. All right. And this, if I don't do it correctly, you're not going to be able to get referrals from CE. So we want to, if you're not getting them, you're not seeing them in the system, let me know. It's probably because I missed your project or something like that. Okay. Continuing on, emergency shelter. So there's going to be two different choices now for emergency shelter. We used to have to, we always tracked whether you were an entry exit or a night by night shelter. But now it's just a different method. They have two separate program options, program type options. One that's just entry, like I said, entry exit or night by night. All of our shelters at this point are entry exit. If for some reason we get to the point where we need a night by night, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but everything is going to be mapped over to an entry exit that we have in our continuum at this point. Okay. All right. And lastly, but again, really, really important for those of you who are listed here at the bottom. Okay. Rapid rehousing is now different. Once we select that you are a rapid rehousing project, we then have to select whether you are providing only services or if you are a housing, like you have rental assistance with or without services provided. We have to have the subtype selected for each of those projects. Everything will be mapped at this point over to housing with or without services, okay? Because we really didn't have any services only that existed on their own. But what this does mean is that those shelter projects, so I'm thinking about those that receive sub-recipient agreements from the COC, from our office, to do rapid rehousing for families, you all will have to start tracking those rapid rehousing clients separately. And we're going to call that a rapid rehousing services only project. And it might overlap a lot with who's actually being served in your shelter. But because of this change in how we're tracking it, it's going to help with our reporting, and it's just going to be HUD compliant now. Okay. So Salvation Army Pass, that's the rapid rehousing for singles. Salvation Army Zelma George Family Promise and Westside Catholic Center. You all will have a separate rapid rehousing project that's actually already created. I've already created them, and they'll be active on 10/2. I'm going to reach out to you all separately to give you some instructions on who to put in right away and who not to and all that stuff. Okay, because we don't need to go back and historically change any data or enter in old data for that. We'll just move forward. So Westside Catholic Verena, I see you. We're just going to repurpose that's the supportive services only project you already have. We'll just change the project type on that. Okay.
Hey, Nick,
Yes.
you had a question in the chat back on the previous slide
Oh,
about the
yeah.
difference between entry exit and night by night program types for shelter.
right, let's see if I actually can get back here. Yeah. Okay. Great question. So entry exit, it's just really about the tracking method. So right now, right, when somebody comes into your shelter or a shelter project, that's their entry, and they remain open all the way up until they are known to exit, but physically no longer stay. Um, the night by night is think of people who have to come in every day and actually get their bed, and we would track them one day at a time. Every day would be a shelter entry. We used to run overflow this way, family overflow. It used to be every day that family would have to check in, they would have to get a referral, they would have to get an enrollment. And it was one day, one day, one day, one day. Well, of course, it makes things look really, really crazy in the data world because it looks like everyone's just staying in that project one day at a time, when really they're staying probably weeks and weeks. But we weren't able to aggregate that together. So we changed it to an entry exit. Anyway, that was a long-winded answer, but does that answer the question, Ange?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, good question. All right, so now we're going to get into the stuff that I'm actually going to show you, I promise. These are the profile screen updates. So first is race and ethnicity. So as you all know, race and ethnicity right now are separate, with ethnicity really being meant to track if somebody is Hispanic or non-Hispanic. Well, they've combined race and ethnicity now to include Hispanic as sort of a race and ethnicity choice, so that reporting will have them all together. They've also added a new option for Middle Eastern or North African. Again, a gap that we do have in our system, so I'm glad that they did that. There is also going to be a text box available for you at all times, regardless of what you choose. If somebody wants to clarify further, what they mean when they say they're white, as an example, right? They can put, "Oh, I'm Irish," right? Or whatever it might be. And you have the ability to type that in. You do not have to. The only requirement is that you check a box, okay? And it is multi-select. You can choose multiple, but that'll be there for you. The other change is around gender. They've updated the language and a couple options for you. So you can read them here. If you choose different identity, a text box will pop up and you'll be able to type something in. And they've added culturally specific identity as a new option. Again, this is multi-select. You can choose whatever applies, and you can go from there. Race and ethnicity will be mapped based on what's already in the system. So if somebody is, if somebody already has white or black or whatever already exists, it'll just be mapped over. But that doesn't mean that maybe, because of, like I said, one of the biggest gaps we had was folks who are of Middle Eastern descent who actually had to identify as white, right? It's going to be mapped over as white. You might want to check those clients and go back in and select their appropriate race and ethnicity. Okay. Gender will not be mapped. So whatever exists in that system, because the options that we already have are still going to be in the system. That's why they're not mapping anything new. So you'll want to make sure you go back into all your clients as you see fit. You don't have to do this all at once, and change their gender to whatever is appropriate now, based on the new options or whatever it might be. Okay. The bottom line is, of course, double check all the data on the profile screen. All right, so let me back out of here and I'll just show you real quick. So this is our training site. I might be a little small. Let me blow it up a little bit. All right, so we're gonna go to our fake client Bear Grylls, and we're going to show you the profile screen. So one of those things that was changed on multiple screens was that idea or that answer of client refuses, now client prefers not to answer. So you can see that here. It just essentially takes the place of client refused. And with gender, here you go, is the pick list. So you can choose whatever you want. If I choose different identity, you're going to be able to type something in. And then race and ethnicity. You can, again, pick list option. You can select whatever is true. And you will always have this additional race and ethnicity detail text box available. It is not a required data element. I can save it without putting anything in there. It's just a totally optional data element. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the enrollment screens. All right. So the first change is around prior living situation. They added a dependent field, and we probably remember this if you were at our last work group. They've added a dependent field for if you choose rental by client with an ongoing housing subsidy. So you'll see, I gave you a little screenshot here. If I select with ongoing subsidy, you have all these different options to choose from as their subsidy source. I lied here. I said that the crosswalk has been created. It will be. I'll work on that. I'm going to get together with the HMIS Data Committee. Some of the members and I are going to get together and create that crosswalk. It would be nice. I might invite some others that I know have some pretty intimate experience with these different housing subsidies, because I want to make sure we get a good crosswalk together so we know what to choose for whatever subsidy source you all are working with. Okay. For all COC, ESG, and HOPWA projects. So COC, if you receive COC funding, so coordinated entry, PSH, rapid rehousing for families, all of those, along with anybody who receives ESG funding, which that's sort of scattered around, and HOPWA, you all are going to have a new data element on your screens that say translation assistance needed. Now, I'm actually going to ask for some feedback from this group right now. We're going to spend some time doing this because the pick list that I have available is set at a local level. We can add and remove languages based on what we know to be true in our community. HUD is recommending that we limit that list to 10 to 15 languages. Any more than that, things you might as well just add all of them. You should see how many there are. It's actually overwhelming. And of course, we'll always have this if different language preferred, then we can type something in. So even if we don't capture it on the pick list options, and it's hopefully it's just like one or two clients that end up needing to have the pick list option, or I'm sorry, have the different language selected and typed in. I'm hoping that's all it is anyway. We have that option. So I would like, if you can, just you can throw it in the chat or you can come off mute or whatever it might be, and just let me know sort of the languages you're running into. If you're running into, obviously if English is not a first language for people, obviously we know some of the normal ones, Spanish, right? I heard from Frontline already that Burundi was one that's like the second most requested in our community. So I have those two, but any others for sure that you're like, we want to have that on our pick list?
I would say Nepali.
Probably, I should probably write this down, huh? I'm asking for feedback and writing nothing down. All right.
I would
Okay.
say also, like, I guess Ukrainian/Russian, and then ASL, if that's an option as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then can
Any
I
other?
ask a question, Nick?
Yeah, go ahead.
If like this gets put in, is there somebody then who like would reach out to the agency or whoever is working with that client to get connected with that translation assistance, or like will there be follow-up on this?
Yeah, so not on our end. There is a requirement in almost all of our contracts that we have that you have to have a third party or another. You have to have a translation service. So I'm thinking about specifically here COC funding, because I know that our office has that in our contracts that you have to have that service available, and I'm pretty sure ESG is like whoever's funding ESG, because the county does that, so does the city. A lot of those contracts have that in there as well. So this is really for HUD to get us feel for what we're experiencing in our community. But what is happening on the service side really does fall on the service providers who are entering that information.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Ebony. I see that you're keeping notes. I appreciate that. Okay, so this is a good list. I'll start with what I'm seeing so far. If other things start to come up as we're typing, if we have to type in one constantly, I'll be able to see that in reporting, and we can add that in later. Okay. All right. Thank you for your feedback. Really appreciate it. The other enrollment screen update. So sexual orientation is now required for COC PSH projects. So make sure you add that to all of your data collection for PSH projects. Now, I'm going to say it again. This is already locally required for all projects. It's already required for RI projects. And now it's just we're adding one more project to collect that COC PSH projects. If you enter it on the profile screen, because we have put that on the profile screen for our community, it will cascade to your enrollment screen. So let's say coordinated entry grabs that information, and you didn't ask the question or you forgot or whatever it might be, and you go to enroll them in your project in HMIS, that answer should come over from whatever was entered by another agency. Okay, if it's entered on the profile screen, it should come over into your enrollment screen. And then for well-being, which is also a COC PSH requirement on almost all, it's on enrollment and on the other screens as well. They retired that, it's removed. You can stop collecting it. Truthfully, you can stop collecting it now. But I'm supposed to tell you 9:30, so I will, because I'm recorded, I forgot. So I see a question from LaShonda. Yes, no problem. I am gonna get this on the OHS website, the recording, and we will send out the link to everybody in the group. And hopefully I have you. I'm pretty sure I do. I think you'll be on that list, so you'll get that from me. Okay. All right. So then one more enrollment screen update, and this is for SSVF only. The percent of AMI has changed. They updated their pick list options to add more. The last permanent address is retired, so you won't have to collect that for any project. And the homelessness prevention targeting criteria, there's 4 questions that they reworded. I can show you this. I won't be able to show you the targeting criteria because I don't have a prevention project set up, but just know that there's just some language changes. The question itself didn't change the spirit of the question. All right, so let's look at an enrollment screen. We'll go into, this is a COC, wait a second, we'll go to training PSH project. We want to enroll him. So you'll see right at the top, the first one that we talked about, translation assistance needed. If I select no, I can move on. If I select yes, we're going to get that preferred language. Now, this was just the training stuff that I threw in, but ours will obviously have the list that we just created together as a group. But you'll choose whatever one you need to choose, and then we can move on to the rest of the enrollment assessment. What was the other? Okay, and you'll see at the very bottom, additional information, sexual orientation was added because this is a COC PSH project. Again, if it was on the profile screen, which it's not because I don't have it on in the training system, but if it was already in there, should pull over. Okay. Let's see, did I miss something else? Oh, you'll note, okay, the well-being questions are gone, so you'll notice that. Oh, and then it was yeah. Okay. Then it was the prior living. So if I choose rental by client with ongoing housing subsidy, and you'll notice if you're familiar with our system that all those options are gone from this initial list. If I choose it, I get another question, rental subsidy type, and I can choose which one applies. Okay, and there are more options than we had available to us previously. So that's why I want to get that crosswalk out to you. So let's say that this guy is a veteran, and we'll go and look at the enrollment for the veteran. You'll see, notice first and foremost, that same rental by client with an ongoing housing subsidy that still exists for this project. And you'll notice the last permanent address section is completely removed. And there's that survivor of domestic violence. That's that language change we talked about. And the last or the household income, the AMI. So there's your options. Okay. All right, any questions so far about the enrollment screen updates? Okay, so moving on then to the status and current living situation screen updates. So let me first mention that they've lumped these together. Not all of you might even know what the current living situation screen is because it's not required for your project. So current living situation is required for coordinated entry, street outreach projects, the path project, very specific projects. So that's if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. You probably won't need to use it. But the status assessments are things are things that you should be familiar with, which is like the annual assessment that you have to do. So there are some changes on those as well. So BCP status is retired. That's only applicable to RI projects. I won't be showing you that. I already showed you that the well-being questions are retired for the COC PSH projects, and the current living situation options are updated to reflect what we just talked about with the prior living situation. So that rental subsidy type will be added to that. All right. So nothing to show you there. It's just those are just some pretty broad changes. All right, now we get into some service updates. So for SSVF, some service updates. So the extended shallow subsidy rental assistance is updated to now just say shallow subsidy financial assistance. I don't know, they didn't like the word extended for whatever reason, and they didn't want the word rental. So they just changed the language, but it's still going to be there. And then on 10.1, I have to add these new services for you all, the landlord and the tenant incentive. So you'll be able to select that and put in the amount that you gave them, all that stuff. The service dates, the way that SSBF wants to track that is going to be a little different. Now we can select whether something is a one-time event versus a long-term event. And so if it's obvious, if it's a long-term event, you're going to have a date range. If it's a single event, you're just going to have one date to enter. So I'll let you all determine sort of how you want me to set up your services for those projects. But we could talk about that off this call. And then some other services here. This is just some language changes. Hopwa changed their substance use disorder services treatment. They changed that to substance use services and treatment. And RI changed postnatal care for a mother to postnatal care for a client or person who gave birth. All right, so coordinated entry event. So they had big plans for coordinated entry events this year. They wanted to change how we were tracking those things. Again, if you're not in coordinated entry or do data entry for coordinated entry, you probably have no clue what I'm talking about, and it's okay. Essentially, what these are embedded behind the scenes, logic built in events that happen when you make referrals from coordinated entry to a certain project type. So if I make a referral to a shelter, there's something that goes behind the scenes that makes it's called an event that just says, yes, there was a referral made to shelter. Some of those have to be more manual, like if somebody is diverted from coordinated or from shelter at the coordinated entry level, you would have to go in and select that coordinated entry event to say that the diversion or problem solving service happened, right? Originally, they had several changes they wanted to put in place, but they have backed off from those. They are not changing anything, so nothing to really note here other than emergency housing vouchers. So the EHV project, that referral that really was being handled by Adrian Lynch and the frontline team. That is going to be removed as a possible event to choose from. You just have to choose this other option, which is referral to other permanent housing project unit resource opening. And if you don't know this already, I might as well make this comment that the EHV referrals we're no longer taking new EHV referrals. So please, you can stop calling Nikki Eggert and Frontline and asking about those. No new referrals will be taken. Okay. All right, exit screen. So, yeah, Nick, exactly. Exit screen. So the same things that apply sort of at the status, um, I'm sorry, the status and current living situation, those screens exist here. The BCP status is retired for those RI projects. The well-being is retired for the PSH projects. And the destination options are updated to reflect the same changes as the prior living situation and the current living situation that we already talked about. So the rental, the biggest change for those is always going to be the rental subsidy and the sort of conditional logic there. I think. Okay, so let me back up. What do we need? Any questions about the data standard changes as I've just went over them? Okay. All right. So what does this mean?
I'm sorry. I couldn't
Yep.
find my unmute. Hi.
Hey, Nikki.
I did have a clarifying question about when you were talking about the rapid rehousing projects or the rapid rehousing profiles that would be attached to the shelters. That would
Yes.
just be for shelter providers and not the rapid rehousing providers, correct?
Correct. So the rapid rehousing providers that already exist, so those programs that, sort of are operated through Eden right now in HMIS, they'll just be changed over to that project type of rapid rehousing housing with or without services, and nothing changes about how data is collected there. What will change is just those shelter providers who are providing rapid rehousing case management in the shelter, and then they move out of shelter and basically transition into a unit. They might maintain that same service provider, but they do get moved into a rapid rehousing grant that has rental assistance attached to it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So yeah, so I mean,
Okay.
things would still stay the same with how like university settlement, they accept some families. I'm just thinking that transition and frontline. But this is really just, is this like another way to note that that family, I guess at what point are they opened with that rapid rehousing, under that rapid rehousing profile while they're in shelter?
So it's probably going to overlap a lot of who's just enrolled in shelter. So a lot of, and those of you who have these projects, please feel free to chime in. But when we did a lot of the monitoring, how it really works is someone comes in a shelter and immediately gets a rapid rehousing intake at the same time. So a lot of those services are like shelter case management and rapid rehousing case management in the shelter sort of occur simultaneously and start at the same time. So you're probably going to see a dual enrollment for those folks in both the shelter and this new rapid rehousing project.
Would this also apply to overflow?
No. So the reason we have to track this one is because the COC grant specifically funds this rapid rehousing for families project, which consists of these four. It's actually five because Journey Center's in there, but these four projects themselves. Because
Okay.
if a family in overflow is getting rapid rehousing case management, it's going to be coming from somewhere that the service dollars are coming from somewhere. So that's where that needs to be tracked. And it usually is, I'm assuming, in like an Eden project once they're enrolled.
Okay, not for overflow. Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
outside of this particular kind of scope that you're referring to. So,
Yeah,
okay,
probably. Okay.
thank you.
Nick, I have a very similar clarifying question, but
Okay.
occasionally NEOC will submit like a rapid rehousing for families, specifically like in the case of like a mom being pregnant or, something like that. Would we also need a specific program for that, or is just, adding to NEOC's street outreach program enough?
Yeah, so I think you're probably going to maintain the workflow as you know it right now, and let's talk about that a little bit more. This has to be created from our perspective because of a reporting issue for these specific the one specific grant that's called Rapid Rehousing for Families. So I know the language is a little weird, but these four, and again five because Journey Center's in there, but those five projects have to actually report out separately. And the only reason we're changing it now is because we now have an option to choose services only. Before we had to keep switching project types. Long story short is that it was a mess. And so I think what you're talking about is very specific, like sort of one-off, doesn't happen very often situation, but we're not paying for that out of this specific grant that we have to make the change for, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Nick.
Sorry. Yeah, no problem. Jeanette, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Nick, I wanted to know, is this with these changes, is this going to affect the way we do our reports when we put our reports in Clarity? When we check
So-
for yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to change. Some of it's going to change. I haven't actually run. This is really, I should probably do that. I haven't actually run a new APR because we do have some of that logic available in the training site. So the things that are going to change are going to be more of like the race and ethnicity options that changed, right? It's just going to be adding more. A lot of these different things that I'm talking about, like well-being, that was a thing that we had to collect forever, and they never created any reporting for it. HUD never
Okay.
released any specs for it. So anything that's new, or they might not even release any reporting, but we can always create something to gather that, like to figure out what's going on with that stuff. But the APR is really going to be those main like demographic information, the stuff that you're already used to, but with some of those more options that we have in the updates to some language.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so what do we have to do now? Where are we going from here? So you have from now until 10/1. So for right now, you want to make sure that you're updating all of your internal agency paperwork that you use to capture these data elements. They have to reflect the new data standard changes. They have to have all this language changes. They don't have to have the language changes, but they have to have the new elements for sure. You want to make sure you have it for the right projects, all of that stuff. On 10/1, for all active clients that you have on 10/1, you'll want to review the profile screens for the correct race and ethnicity and the gender information. Again, you don't have to make this a big project. Come about it naturally, right? It doesn't have to be all updated right away. But definitely if you have like a report due, or if you have something like that that's going to be on the new data standards, like in the next quarter, let's say, you want to make sure that you have those new data elements updated in the system, because that reporting is only going to pull the new stuff. And then you want to make sure you review your enrollment screens and all the data that may be missing. So again, hopefully this comes about organically. Maybe you have some annual assessments that need to be done, whatever it might be, that you can sort of tackle this as you go. But as you review these enrollment assessment screens, make sure that if you have the certain funding, so for translation assistance, COC funding, ESG funding, HOPWA funding, that you have to go back and enter that translation assistance in there. It could just be answering no, right? But you need to make sure that you go in there and do that. And then for sexual orientation, make sure that that stuff gets into your COC PSH enrollments, okay? Because that will come up as a problem, you know, if there's blank or data not collected, right, for those different elements on your enrollment screens. Okay, and then the rapid rehousing shelter providers, the ones that I've already called out specifically, we're going to have to enroll all the clients receiving rapid rehousing case management in the new rapid rehousing services only project. Again, I will reach out to you separately to tell you exactly how I think we should go about doing this and get your feedback on that. But we're going to, on 10/1 is when we'll start entering those people. That project again is already created. I just got to make some updates to the project type when that becomes available to me. And you'll have it on 10/2 ready to go. And then moving forward, obviously, you're just collecting and entering all that data that we just talked about, along with, of course, everything that didn't change. None of that changes, so we're going to keep collecting it. Okay. I've also included 3 links here for you. So the first one is the data standards manual from the HUD Exchange. The second one is the data dictionary, which gives a little bit more rationale and like beef behind what all this means. And then I also included a link to the BitFocus help desk, which they create fantastic help desk articles about a whole lot of stuff. Like if you ever needed to go there for, oh man, I forgot how to enroll somebody, or I forgot how to do this, that, or other thing, you can go in there, you can type it in a search bar, and it's really good at least getting you through the data entry piece of your day-to-day workflow. But they have this whole section dedicated to the 2024 data standard resources. I'm calling out 2024 only because I just want to make sure you're aware that they do have a lot of like old data standard stuff on there, like 2022, 2020. So just make sure you're selecting the right one when you're going through there, if you decide to go there. Okay. All right. So I think that was it. Now, I want to say that I see your hand, Sharon. Give me 1 second. I just want to say that I know that it actually a lot of it's just language changes, right? That's a lot of just some updates like that. There's only 1 or 2 new data elements, and it only applies to very specific projects. So I'm happy that that's the case. At any point in time, if you have any questions, you're into something you don't know the answer to, whatever it might be, just reach out. I mean, I think I know most of you. We talk a lot, so if you have anything you need, you can always reach out. Sharon, go ahead.
Okay, Nick, so the report is due to you by the 15th of the month. We close that out on that Friday before the first, like the 20, the 30.
Oh, you're talking about the data quality monitoring that we do?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you could still send it to me on the 10/15, the 10/15 date. You'll just use the new APR format. Take your time on that. I don't, if it's late, it's late. There's a lot of changes going on. So, but that you should just be able to use the the APR. That's the new one that's available.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Yes, so we'll be able to pull that report after October the 1st.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
they're just it's gonna be the newest version of it, and
Okay.
it'll still be good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right. So obviously it's now your time. Whatever you need from me, even if it's not related to the data standard changes, I'm happy to answer questions now. Of course, we can still talk about data standard changes, whatever you need. Go ahead, Robert.
So for the APR, since Hispanic is being moved from ethnicity to race, if there are 2 or more selections under race, how is that being displayed?
Yeah, it'll be displayed as multiple races. So right now, the way it works too, like I know ethnicity is separate, but if you have the option to choose multiple races, if you choose more than one, like you can choose white and black, on the APR, it'll come out as multiple races.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay. Well, I hope that means that everyone is ready to go and has everything under control, and not that everyone's very confused, because that's not going to be good. But let me know, like I said, let me know if you need anything. I'm very much happy to help out. We're all going to be going through this change together. So it was really good to see some of your faces. I'm really thankful that you all were here. And if you need anything from me, I'll talk to you then. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Be
Bye.
safe.